Okay, so sorry, the last video kind of got cut off a little bit, but it was Jean Valjean had come home after the wedding, Marius' wedding, to Cosette, and he had looked at the box that he took with him everywhere, that he never ever left from place to place, even though that they were hiding. And in the box was Cosette's baby clothes. So he did the right thing by Cosette and loved her, and he really misses her, and that's his daughter. And you'll see what happens next. So we're starting on book 7, the last drop in the chalice, chapter 1, the 7th circle in the 8th heaven. The day after a wedding is lonely. The privacy of the happy ones is respected, and therefore their slumber is a little belated. The tumult of visits and felicitations does not begin until later. On the morning of the 17th of February, it was a little after noon, when Basque, his cloth and feather duster under his arm, busy doing his anteroom, heard a light rap at the door. There was no ring which is considerate on such a day. Basque opened and saw Monsieur Fauchelevent. He led him into the drawing-room, still cluttered and topsy-turvy, and looking like the battlefield of the evening's festivities. "Faith, monsieur," observed Basque, "we are waking up late." "Is your master up?" inquired Jean Valjean. "How is monsieur's arm?" answered Basque. "Better. Is your master up?" "Which one? The old or the new one?" "Monsieur Pontmercy." "Monsieur the Baron?" said Basque, drawing himself up. "One is baron to his servants above all. Something of it reflects on to them. They have what a philosopher would call the spattering of the title, and it flatters them. Marius, to mention it in passing, a militant republican, and so he had proved, was now a baron in spite of himself. A slight revolution had taken place in the family in regard to this title. Now it was Monsieur Gillenormand who clung to it, and Marius who made light of it. But Colonel Pontmercy had written, "My son will bear my title." Marius obeyed. And then Cosette, in whom the woman was beginning to dawn, was in raptures at being a baroness. "Monsieur the Baron," repeated Basque. "I will go and see. I will tell him that Monsieur Fauchelevent is here." "No, do not tell him that it is I. Tell him that somebody would like to speak with him in private, and do not give him any name." "Ah," said Basque. "I want to surprise him." "Ah," repeated Basque, giving himself the second "ah" as an explanation of the first. And he went off. Jean Valjean remained alone. The drawing-room, as we have just said, was in total disorder. It seemed that by listening carefully, a vague echo of the wedding could still be heard. On the floor there were all sorts of flowers, which had fallen from garlands and headdresses. The candles burned to the socket added stalactites of wax to the pendants of the chandeliers. Not a piece of furniture was in place. In the corners, 3 or 4 armchairs, drawn up in a circle, seemed to be continuing a conversation. Altogether it was joyful. There is still a certain grace in a dead festival. It has been happy. On those chairs in disarray, among those wilting flowers, under those extinguished lights, there have been thoughts of joy. The sun succeeded the chandelier and cheerfully entered the drawing-room. A few minutes elapsed. Jean Valjean was motionless in the spot where Basque had left him. He was very pale. His eyes were hollow and so sunken in their sockets from lack of sleep that they could hardly be seen. His black coat had the weary folds of a garment that one has spent the night in. The elbows were whitened with that down that is left on the cloth by the chafing of linen. Jean Valjean was looking at the window traced by the sun on the floor at his feet. There was a noise at the door. He looked up. Marius entered, his head erect, his mouth smiling, an indescribable light upon his face, his forehead radiant, his eyes triumphant. He, too, had not slept. "It is you, father," he exclaimed on seeing Jean Valjean. "That idiot of a Basque with his mysterious air, but you have come too early. It is still only 12:30. Cosette is asleep." That word "father," said to Monsieur Fauchelevent by Marius, signified supreme felicity. There had always been, as we know, barrier, coldness, and constraint between them, ice to break or to melt. Marius had reached that degree of joy where the barrier was falling, the ice was dissolving, and Monsieur Fauchelevent was to him, as to Cosette, a father. He continued. Words were pouring out of him, which is characteristic of these divine paroxysms of joy. "How glad I am to see you! If you knew how we missed you yesterday! Good morning, father. How is your hand? Better, I hope?" And satisfied with the good reply he made to himself, he went on. "We have both talked a great deal about you. Cosette loves you so much. You will not forget that your room is here. We don't want any more of the Rue de l'Homme Arme. We don't want any more of it at all. How could you go to live in a street like that, which is sickly, which is scowling, which is ugly, with a barrier at one end where you are cold, and where no one can drive in? You will come and settle in here, and today, or you will have to settle with Cosette. She intends to lead us all by the nose, I warn you. You have seen your room. It's close to ours. It looks out on the garden. The lock has been fixed. The bed is made. Everything is ready. You have nothing to do but to come. Cosette has put a great old easy chair of Utrecht velvet beside your bed, and she told it, stretch out your arms for him. Every spring a nightingale comes to the clump of acacias in front of your windows. You will have her in 2 months. You will have her nest at your left and ours at your right. By night she will sing, and by day Cosette will talk. Your room faces full south. Cosette will arrange your books there for you, your voyage of Captain Cook and the other, Vancouver's, all your things. I believe there's a little valise that you treasure. I have selected a place of honor for it. You have conquered my grandfather. You suit him. We'll live together. Do you play whist? My grandfather will be overjoyed if you know whist. You will take Cosette out for a walk on my court days. You'll give her your arm, the way you used to at the Luxembourg. We have positively decided to be very happy, and you're part of our happiness. Do you understand, Father? Come now. Will you have breakfast with us today? Monsieur, said Jean Valjean, I have one thing to tell you. I am a former convict. The perceptible limit of acute sounds may be crossed just as easily for the mind as for the ear. These words, I am a former convict, coming from Monsieur Fauchelevent's mouth, and entering Marius' ear, went beyond the possible. Marius did not hear. It seemed to him that something had just been said to him, but he did not know what. He stood aghast. He then perceived that the man who was talking to him was terrifying. Excited as he was, he had not until this morning noticed that frightful pallor. Jean Valjean untied the black tie, holding up his right arm, took off the cloth wound about his hand, laid his thumb bare, and showed it to Marius. There is nothing the matter with my hand, he said. Marius looked at the thumb. There has never been anything the matter with it, continued Jean Valjean. There was, in fact, no trace of a wound. Jean Valjean went on. It was best for me to be absent from your wedding. I kept away as much as I could. I feigned this wound so as not to commit a forgery, so as not to introduce a nullity into the marriage acts to be excused from signing. Marius stammered out, What does this mean? It means, answered Jean Valjean, that I was in the chain gangs. You're driving me mad, exclaimed Marius in dismay. Monsieur Pontmercy, said Jean Valjean, I spent 19 years in prison for robbery. Then I was sentenced for life. For robbery. For second offense. At this very moment I am illegally at large. It was useless for Marius to recoil before the reality, to refuse the fact, to resist the evidence. He was compelled to yield. He began to understand, and as always happens in such case, he understood beyond the truth. He felt the shiver of a horrible interior flash. An idea that made him shudder crossed his mind. He caught a glimpse in the future of a hideous destiny for himself. Tell me everything, he cried. You are Cosette's father. And he took 2 steps backward, with an expression of unspeakable horror. Jean Valjean raised his head with such a majestic attitude that he seemed to be rising to the ceiling. It is necessary for you to believe me in this, monsieur, although the oath of men such as me is not considered valid. Here he paused, then with a sort of sovereign, sepulchral authority, he added, articulating slowly and emphasizing his syllables, You will believe me. I, the father of Cosette, before God, no, Monsieur Baron Pontmercy, I am a peasant from Faverolles. I earn my living by pruning trees. My name is not Fauchelevent, my name is Jean Valjean. I am nothing to Cosette. Be reassured. Marius faltered. Who proves it to me? I do, since I say so. Marius looked at this man. He was mournful, yet self-possessed. No lie could come out of such a calm. What is frozen is sincere. We feel the truth in that sepulchral coldness. I believe you, said Marius. Jean Valjean bowed his head as an acceptance, and continued, What am I to Cosette? A passer-by. 10 years ago I did not know that she existed. I love her, it is true. A child you have seen when she is little, and you are already old, you love. When a man is old, he feels like a grandfather toward all little children. You can, it seems to me, suppose I have something that resembles a heart. She was an orphan, without father or mother. She needed me. That is why I began to love her. Children are so weak that anybody, even a man like me, can be their protector. I performed that duty with regard to Cosette. I did not think that one could truly call so little a thing a good deed. But if it is a good deed, Well, set it down that I have done it. Make note of that mitigating circumstance. Today, Cosette leaves my life. Our two roads separate. From now I can do nothing more for her. She is Madame Pontmercy. Her protector is changed, and Cosette gains by the change. All is well. As for the 600,000 francs, you have not spoken of them to me, but I anticipate your thought. That is a trust. How did this trust come into my hands? What does it matter? I have made over the trust. Nothing more can be asked of me. I have completed the restitution by telling you my real name. This concerns me too. I want you to know who I am. And Jean Valjean looked Marius in the face. Everything that Marius felt was tumultuous and incoherent. Certain gusts of destiny make such waves in our soul. Okay, so the rest of the chapter is just their conversation, and so Jean Valjean starts to separate himself from Cosette until he is no longer a part of their life, and Cosette lets him because that's what Marius wants, because Marius is absolutely appalled by the fact that Jean Valjean is a convict. Okay, so we will pick up on chapter 3. They remember the garden in the Rue Plumet. Page 1419.